Bethesda's Starfield has been on a wild ride since its release in September of this year. From initial praise and high scores from the press calling it Bethesda's best game ever, to the eventual rising tide of bad review scores on Steam, which would eventually take the game from a score of mostly positive to overall mixed. I think it's safe to say that Starfield has had some huge expectations to live up to, being Bethesda's first new franchise in, 25 years. Originally slated for November 2022 for its launch, the game was delayed by almost a full year to September 6, 2023, and while it was clear that the extra time did benefit the game somewhat with an additional layer of polishing, most reviewers did acknowledge that Starfield is Bethesda's most bug-free-ish game so far, if you want to call it that, but it was also clear after completing everything there was to do in Starfield that the game was lacking in some of the areas that made Bethesda's other titles like Skyrim truly great and successful. And now fast forward to the end of 2023 and we're finally getting word of a major Starfield update scheduled for the near future. From city maps to mod support to all new ways of travel, as well as a renewed commitment to regular fixes and updates on the consistent schedule. While I don't believe this will satisfy the majority of Starfield players right away, there's a ton of potential here, which we're going to unpack in this video. First, a quick word from today's video sponsor, Star Trek Fleet Command. Star Trek Fleet Command is a 4X MMO game set in the ever-expanding Star Trek universe. Recruit legendary characters to crew iconic ships from over 50 years of Star Trek stories, and send them on missions of exploration to expand your territory. Now, personally, I am a big fan of all the included Star Trek characters, like Captain Kirk, Spock, or Michael Burnham, and of course the iconic ships like the Enterprise, which bring a huge sense of nostalgia to this game. And the game's amazing graphics are visually immersive, bringing the universe to life with the amount of detail they've included. Plus, being free to play means you can jump in at any time with anyone. Epic battles with players from across the world bring a competitive edge to this game, and with a huge community of players online, friendships are made and alliances are formed. The new immersive Star Trek story set in the Kelvin timeline offers players a fresh narrative experience, exploring alternate dimensions and storylines, and during the month of December, they've added even more TNG commanders, including Riker and Deanna, and a brand new feature called Wave Defense, where players must defend a central point from waves of increasingly powerful enemies where collaboration is key. So check out Star Trek Fleet Command using my link in the description or the pinned comment down below, or scan the QR code on your screen. And don't forget to use my code WARPSPEED to unlock even more bonus rewards, including 10 epic shards of Kirk right now. And thanks again to Star Trek Fleet Command for sponsoring this video. Let's start by talking about some possible updates we might see sooner than expected for traveling on planets in Starfield, which was hinted at in this Reddit post from just a few days ago. In this Bethesda Game Studios post, they mentioned they've been hard at work on many new features the community has asked for, including city maps, mod support, and quote, all new ways of traveling, whatever that means. Now, this last line is the most interesting to me, and it certainly matches up with one of the most commonly requested features, at least that I have seen for Starfield, and that is some alternate forms of planet-side travel, other than, just using your jetpack and, of course, basic running across the surface. Now, I think I know what they're talking about here, and it's also based on pre-existing assets already in the game. So what does this mean? Well, I do think there are a ton of options and different paths that Bethesda could take when we're talking about new ways of traveling, things that would make it a lot easier, obviously, to get from point A to point B on these larger planet maps. But I think the most likely option is going to be land vehicles, things like rovers, for example. Now, this is what most people seem to want from what I've seen. And if you've been paying attention as you explored different planets in Starfield, you may have already seen a rover or two that wasn't actually usable. You can literally sit in these vehicles that are already placed out in the world. I've come across a few of these myself just randomly, and so making these vehicles mobile seems like a logical next step. And maybe this is something that Bethesda planned to do all along, but just ran out of time to implement in the lead up to release. I honestly would not be surprised if this was the case based on these existing assets in the game. Now, I do hope that Bethesda takes vehicles to another level in Starfield though, giving us the option to craft or build these vehicles for ourselves. We already have the insanely detailed shipbuilding system, for example, so letting us build our own planetary vehicles inside that shipbuilder seems like a logical next step and a great use of the existing technology and an existing system to really tie things together. I would love to mix and match different vehicle parts from different vehicle vendors to create unique designs, exactly how we can already do this with ships in Starfield. And I imagine they would also need to tie this into shipbuilding itself with some type of loading bay or some ability to carry your vehicle with you on your ship. I mean, at the very least, if we can't create our own vehicles, then there needs to be a big variety of options for us to purchase or to get through quests, so there's not just this one vanilla rover that serves as the only option. I'm talking vehicles with wheels, vehicles with tracks, even maybe hovering capabilities or jet thrusters. I just want the craziest options possible that still fit, within the Starfield universe. But regardless, I think this is the big update that's going to be coming next, just based on this post talking about all new ways of traveling. And they said ways, not just a way, but ways plural. But that's not the only big update coming to Starfield in 2024. This particular Reddit post from Bethesda also mentioned the introduction of another huge missing feature for the game, and that is city maps. Now, this is another big missing feature on the list of things players would love to be able to get access to in Starfield, and probably one of the first features that most players, including myself, noticed seemed to be missing from the overall experience. Because while the cities in Starfield aren't as big as they may seem at first, they can still be very confusing to navigate through. I mean, the way that many districts are laid out in cities like New Atlantis, for example, doesn't always make the most sense at first glance, and good luck if you're trying to find a specific vendor or a named location without having tagged it first in your mission journal, because there's really no way to find it other than wandering around aimlessly and checking every door. So knowing exactly where you want to go with the use of a city map, being able to ping and set custom routes to those locations, these are features that Starfield needed right from the beginning. I'd also love to see more quality of life improvements to the game's other map systems like the planetary map and the star system map especially, because those are a bit rough as well. For example, an option to save your favorite star systems or planets in a quick access type of menu would be amazing for saving time during space travel without having to scroll from one end of the galaxy map to the other, while also trying to remember where that one specific planet or system was or what the name of it was, especially since there's such a reliance on fast traveling back and forth to previously visited locations in Starfield's gameplay. But at least it sounds like we're getting these updates now pretty soon. In fact, maybe sooner than we might think. In this same post, Bethesda went on to explain that they were hard at work on many new features like the new travel options and the city maps we just mentioned, but also more updates for mod support and visual updates, including FSR 3, and that these would be rolling out with regular cadence and expected roughly every 6 weeks or so. Now they went on to explain that if it's a quick fix like the recent update to fix those pet asteroids, they'll try to get those out as well even quicker, but that safety was the main priority with this new set of updates, and that they were taking their time to test even the smallest changes because Starfield is such a big game. So what does this all mean? Well, Starfield's last update, the previously mentioned asteroid fix, dropped on December 11th, 2023, and if we were to project out another 6 weeks from that date, accounting for a few weeks off for the holidays, I expected we might see Starfield's next update sometime around early to mid-February. Now, Bethesda themselves confirmed this schedule only yesterday with a more expanded look at this content roadmap for 2024, giving us even more details on the new updates. They stated, first, we're targeting updates roughly every 6 weeks starting in February. These updates will include everything from quality of life improvements to content and feature updates. Players can also join the Steam beta branch, by the way, to be the first to check out these updates for themselves. Now, in addition to the new travel options and the city maps we mentioned earlier, for those who love shipbuilding, they'll be also expanding on the ship customization with ship decorations, new shipbuilding options, and more. I'm not quite sure what ship decorations means in this case, but maybe it has something to do with painting our ship with specific decals or logos. So for example, if you decide to join the Crimson Fleet faction, maybe you could also paint their logo somewhere on your ship's hull. Or maybe this instead has to do with decorating your ship's interior. We'll just have to wait and see, but this is definitely exciting for those of you who enjoy the ship customization experience in Starfield. But beyond that, there are also some exciting new gameplay options in store for us, including updates to Starfield's difficulty. From Bethesda's update article, they mentioned that with these new settings, you'll be able to alter your gameplay to allow for an easier or more challenging experience that will expand beyond the normal difficulty settings. These will allow you to easily customize carrying capacity cargo access distance, ship damage, vendor credits, how you suffer afflictions, new survival mechanics, and more. So this, I think, is huge, and it seems that it will allow players to build into Starfield their own custom difficulty settings. For example, for convenience, you might want to increase the range where you can access your ship's cargo. This is going to be great for quickly storing heavy objects that you pick up out in the world, and especially for storing crafting materials. Also, being able to adjust vendor credit amounts is actually a huge quality of life improvement for Starfield, one that we've needed for a very long time, though I do think it's kind of strange that this is an adjustable setting. I mean, who would actually want vendors to have less credits? We want more, at least 3 to 4 times more available credits for all vendors, so that we don't have to rest multiple times to sell off our inventory. But I think the fact that they're actually going to put this option in at all is definitely a step in the right direction. We can see that there's also talk of survival mechanics coming into the difficulty settings for Starfield as well, which I think is amazing. And if you've heard Todd Howard talk about the previous iterations of Starfield gameplay when the game was still being developed, then you've probably heard that Starfield actually had more challenging survival aspects built into the gameplay, including a greater significance given to those status afflictions, or basically negative status effects that the player could pick up from traveling to less inhabitable planets. And I believe these options were ultimately removed from Starfield at launch to make the game a bit more user-friendly to a wider base of players, but I think Bethesda is starting to realize that some players actually want the game to be more challenging, and that a more difficult survival mode would actually be pretty popular, so now it seems like they're bringing it back. I can't wait to see where they go with this myself. So all in all, this is starting to feel a bit like Cyberpunk 2077, with this evolving roadmap of improvements still to come, and most of those based on player feedback. Cyberpunk did of course set the bar along with earlier titles like No Man's Sky for post-release support, feature improvements, and updates, which I honestly think is the route that Bethesda is going to want to take with Starfield. They will definitely want to commit to getting Starfield right, even if it takes more time. They have additional pressure now from Microsoft and Xbox, and they also want to win back fans for the next huge release, which is going to be The Elder Scrolls 6. But with that in mind, there are so many more improvements I can think of that I'd still like to see in Starfield. Of course, better maps and usable vehicles are high up on that list, but that's really not all. I mean, what about more unique weapons and spacesuits? And what about that weapon skin option that's just been sitting in the weapon mods UI since the release of the game? Getting that fully functional would be amazing. And personally, I'd love to see a full rebalance of skills and the skill trees eventually come to the game to make some of the more useless skills better and to make some of the more overpowered skills come back to earth just a little bit. Some combat skills, for example, like robotics, manipulation, these are just so clunky to use in actual combat in Starfield that typically they aren't worth using at all, and I actually feel bad for wasting those skill points in the first place. Also, the crafting skills of Starfield, other than weapon engineering, which is pretty good, do seem a bit lackluster, especially cooking. And I know this was a big disappointment for many players when we figured out how minimal food buffs actually were, but then also that you couldn't even stack those bonuses either, and it really just takes the fun out of that crafting skill completely. Speaking of skills, the fact that there is no option to respec your skill points in Starfield is a little bit crazy in my opinion, even if they can justify it by saying that you can gain as many levels as you want and therefore skill points are unlimited, but that almost seems like an excuse when it comes right down to it. I mean, we have the option to respec every other aspect of our character's look and appearance through the enhanced shop, so why not do something similar with skills? Or if you want to make it, more difficult, just tie skill respecking into New Game Plus to at least give players the option and maybe some extra incentive to start that new game. Obviously, there's so much that could be done here. The bounty system is another aspect of the game that could use some fundamental improvements to make it more engaging, as could outposts, especially connecting outposts between planets, which seems a bit more difficult than it should be. But let me know in the comment section what other improvements you think still need to be made in Starfield. Now, we haven't even talked about Starfield's official mod support, which is also coming in 2024. Bethesda confirmed this as well with their recent statement, saying that official mod support will be coming to Starfield with the launch of Creations early next year, with Starfield getting its own exporter and access to a new creation kit. So more access to modding in Starfield will definitely be a good thing, and I can't wait to see what modders do with some of these empty planets, maybe even creating entirely new cities or storylines for us to explore. Of course, there is a huge potential for aggressive monetization here, which we'll need to keep an eye on, obviously, but this is also going to be a great way to support mod designers in a more tangible financial way. And I also think with Starfield being free on Game Pass, this is obviously another opportunity for Bethesda, but they'll need to get it right in terms of the monetization. But hopefully we get all these changes and updates sooner rather than later, or at least the vehicle's update and addition of maps coming in the first 1 or 2 updates next year. We also know that the Shattered Space DLC is coming in 2024, but honestly it would be great for the community to get some of these exciting updates into the game before that DLC drops, just to get a more positive buzz going surrounding this game again. I think Bethesda is starting that right now with these announcements, so we'll have to see how quickly they follow through with this to keep that ball rolling. I still believe that Starfield has a lot of potential, and I haven't given up on the game yet myself, but let me know what you think down in the comments section below. Are you still playing the game, and if not, will these new updates get you back into Starfield again? And be sure to check out some of our Starfield videos on screen now, including tons of secrets that you probably missed, and I will see you there.